I signed up for this mailing list where we can get one of those 2-for-1. What's up, YouTube? You know the drill. The Fat Guy and I are covering the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan and the coaching staff, who the Niners have added, who they've lost. Then we go over the depth chart. We give you the 49ers team grade going into 2018 and let you know if you should bet the over or under 49ers wins. They're currently listed at 8.5. Fat Guy, last year the 49ers won 6 games. What did you think of their season? It was actually quite interesting.
It was like a Charles Dickens novel. It was a tale of two halves rather than a tale of two cities. The 49ers, they looked a little inept with CJ Beathard or Beat Hard or however the fuck you say it during the first half of the 49ers campaign. Now, when they acquired Jimmy Garoppolo and managed to play him, they went, I believe, undefeated, giving them their 6 wins. Of course, ruining their draft position in the process, but whatever, you got to see Jimmy G chuck it around, and it was awesome.
And at head coach, they have Kyle Shanahan, who just finished his rookie season. He's gone 6-10, 38% winning percentage. What did you think of his first year as the head coach?
Complete badass. Dare I say, better than his father? Yeah, I am going to dare I say it. However, though, he was excellent as an offensive coordinator for Atlanta. Kind of cut his teeth as the offensive coordinator in Cleveland. But then once he had some talent in Atlanta, he really elevated the process. Of course, he'll be known for passing it on third down with Matt Ryan, who got sacked, fumbled by Donta Hightower, 28-3 to losing the Super Bowl, yada yada. He's an excellent coordinator, he's an excellent coach, and I have high prospects for Shanahan and the 49ers. Quick note on Kyle Shanahan is he kind of sets his plays up so that when the defense makes adjustments at halftime, he already has a counter playbook to those adjustments set in place. It's really forward-thinking, it's young, progressive coaching, mirroring the efforts of the LA Rams, who also have a young, fresh approach to football. I really like the Rams and the 49ers and how they've taken over this division from the basement to the top.
I was kind of worried about him last year. Kyle Shanahan is a coach that we really, really, really like, and it looked like he was not getting any sleep. It must be tough when you lose your first 9 games.
Yeah, but the roster was shitty, and they managed to do something at quarterback. And look, they finished strong. Now, finishing strong when you're not going to make the playoffs, that's as good as you can do, and that's what they did.
He's also the offensive coordinator, which is probably a good thing for the team. And at defensive coordinator, they have Robert Saleh.
Robert Saleh, Dearborn, Michigan guy. He won a Super Bowl with the San Francisco 49ers at tight end, I believe. Now, he's been in and around the defensive game around, I think, 2004, 2005 with the Houston Texans. I'm not sure how well he's going to be able to manage this talent, but he definitely has some talent at his disposal. So we'll really get to see the mettle of Robert Saleh in the upcoming year.
Let's move on to players that they've added. I know a guy that you're excited about is running back Jerick McKinnon.
Jerick McKinnon, he's always been in the shadows of Minnesota when they had Adrian Peterson, when they signed Latavius Murray, even though he kind of started over Latavius Murray, or they split reps, however you want to pull it. He split time with Matt Asiata. I like Jerick McKinnon. I think he's a good player. And, this is my fantasy boasting because I always end up drafting him or waiver wiring him, whatever have you. Jerick McKinnon's a good player, I feel. He can play mostly every down, if not every down. So they should have success with him, and he seems like he's one of Kyle Shanahan's guys.
They've also added 3 depth linemen in Jonathan Cooper, Mike Person, as well as Weston Richburg, all guys that have sparingly played and played all right.
Jonathan Cooper is a former first-round pick by the Arizona Cardinals. He's bounced around, I feel like, every team. He was on New England, he was on Cleveland, and now he's on San Francisco. He has the size and athleticism to carve out a role, but it's always been everything else that's been a difficulty for him. Will he play? I'm not quite sure, but he should give them some added depth on the offensive line. Now, Weston Richburg, I didn't mind his time in New York. He was a Giant. He started. That Giants offensive line wasn't necessarily good, but this is also another depth signing. They're going to sign a bunch of guys, throw it at the wall and see what sticks, but there are some talented players in that depth.
And at right tackle, they add the first-round pick in Mike McGlinchey.
Mike McGlinchey played in that heavily coveted Notre Dame offensive line just this past year. Along with him and Quentin Nelson, who got poached by the Indianapolis Colts, I felt was also an awesome draft signing. He should start right away, and when you're bookended by Joe Staley on the other end, they're going to be good from the edges, it feels like, in San Francisco.
And moving on to the defensive side of the ball, they add linebacker Jeremiah Attachu as well as Corey Toomer.
Jeremiah Attachu is of big play fame for the San Diego Chargers, when he scored, I believe, a pair of defensive or special team style touchdowns, blocking kicks, that sort of thing. His athleticism really popped off the screen, and he's become a depth signing because it hasn't really worked out since those big plays, but he does have that coveted athleticism, and he's with a young group of guys where maybe it'll come out.
And at cornerback, they add the ageless wonder and Richard Sherman.
Richard Sherman, I don't know how ageless he is. His skill set is ageless, though, because he's never been a speed guy, yet he's still been one of the top corners in the league for some time now. Richard Sherman throwing a lot of shade at his former Seahawks team, but I think he's got a good fit in the young crew he's got around him. There's some good things brewing for San Francisco, and it feels refreshing talking about him since I've had to trash the Seattle Seahawks just not that long ago.
It's good that things are a-brewing because I thought that only happened in the Windy City. For players they've lost, at running back, Carlos Hyde.
I always like Carlos Hyde, Ohio State guy, Ohio guy, moving home back to Cleveland, well, Ohio. They never seem to gel with Carlos Hyde. They played Matt Breida a lot too, and they always hyped up Matt Breida, and they drafted Joe Williams last year, who got hurt and I don't believe played. So Carlos Hyde, I think it's a good mutual parting of the ways, and they're going to be able to pick up the slack and do the things that they've wanted to do with Jerick McKinnon starting.
And using a first-round pick on a right tackle, they were able to trade away Trent Brown to the Patriots.
Yeah, the Patriots, they need to get better. Trent Brown was a good player for them. He was a later-round pick that developed into a pretty decent right tackle, and now he's gone away to bigger and better things. Maybe not, though, in New England. This trade could bite them in the ass, but Trent Brown became expendable, and I'm sure he wasn't too happy about his position in jeopardy when they drafted Mike McGlinchey. I always like competition between positions, and this kind of hurts that because you're essentially crowning Mike McGlinchey as the starter in San Francisco, which isn't always a good thing. However, though, maybe that town wasn't big enough for the both of them, and I guess good riddance to Trent Brown. Enjoy your time in New England.
Well, he also has the injury, so it'll be interesting to see how he fares coming off of injury, playing again.
Yes, another question mark. So I guess you went younger at the position then.
They also lost guard Zane Beadles as well as center Daniel Kilgore.
Zane Beadles is a free agent, hasn't got too many whiffs, so it shouldn't really hurt them. And they added all those other guys, so you should be able to maybe upgrade on play. And don't forget, they have a former first-round pick in Josh Garnett, which they haven't been able to glean very much effort out of. So maybe perhaps they think that he's in line to start finally for the San Francisco 49ers. They've moved on from Daniel Kilgore, another veteran in the league, but like I said, they've added so many other players that he won't be missed too much.
Now let's go over the roster top to bottom. At quarterback, it is Jimmy Garoppolo.
I think the world of him. Overrated, gets thrown around a lot with Jimmy Garoppolo, but I really think he is the real deal. He looked awesome. He's looked awesome in every game that he's played, even when he was on New England. He made Tom Brady nervous. I'm pretty sure Bill Belichick didn't want to trade him. That whole story about Kraft and Brady expediting the trade of Jimmy Garoppolo could all be a pile of bull. But who knows? Maybe he was threatening Tom Brady's job. He looked really good last year, and I'm really excited to see him with a full year of offense under his belt under Kyle Shanahan.
And at running back, they have a nice three-headed monster in Jerick McKinnon, Matt Breida, and fourth-round pick Joseph Williams from last year. A guy who didn't get a chance to play because of injury, but a guy that I was really high on coming into the league.
I wouldn't call it necessarily a three-headed monster, but I think it's sufficient for this team. It should be good, and the way that they use their running backs is kind of creative. So I do like this grouping. Feels like all of these guys, they're not exceptional talents, but they're able to do everything, which gives you the versatility the San Francisco 49ers need to succeed.
And not a lot of fullbacks that we talk about, but Kyle Juszczyk is an excellent fullback that's going to be playing in front of those three guys.
Kyle Juszczyk, he's had some off-the-field issues, but he has been decent. He was one of the best fullbacks in the league when he played for Baltimore. But again, that's not really saying too much. But he was involved in the offense last year for the San Francisco 49ers.
At wide receiver, they have Pierre Garçon, Marquise Goodwin, and slot receiver Trent Taylor. Other guys they also have they've added a second-round pick in Dante Pettis, a seventh-round pick in Richie James, as well as guys who've bounced around like Aldrick Robinson.
This isn't exactly a star-studded group. Trent Taylor, I really didn't like him. I always felt he was going to get clobbered. He's probably the size of Big Rye. Just one tiny mousy little guy. But he did kind of grow on me later on. He got a lot of targets. Marquise Goodwin, now that guy I have a lot of respect for. Seems like a good guy off the field, and he kind of molded himself from Olympic sprinter to NFL receiver last year. He made a lot of good plays down the stretch, a lot of tough, difficult plays. Now Garcon, he's had a lot of tough years, and he's kind of at the end of his rope, but another receiver I've always liked. Is this receiving group as good as I think they are? Probably not, but they're full of guys that I like. Good football players, as Bill Belichick would say. They're not that deep, but they have some youth to them. It's not a strength, but I don't think it's a weakness either.
I want to give a shout out to Marcus Goodwin. I don't do this for a lot of players, but he really touched me last year with what happened to his son, breaking down in the end zone. It was quite the story. For him not to tell anyone before the game and for everyone to find out after is something. Bought a house, believe for his mom and his sister this year, a sister with a disability. It's just really nice to see. You hear so much bad stuff about the NFL and NFL players. There are good people, there are good players, and Marquise Goodwin is one of them. A guy that just works really hard to stay in this league. He's really fast, which helps, but everything else is unreal to see. Let's move on to tight ends, where they have George Kittle as well as Garrett Selleck.
Now, George Kittle was a rookie last year, and Kyle Shanahan really gave him a trial by fire. I wouldn't say he necessarily succeeded, but I don't think he failed either. There should be some improvement. He really believes in his guys. That's one thing about Shanahan, is he believes in the guys that are selected. Him and John Lynch have become an unlikely duo at GM and head coach, and George Kittle is one of the fruits of that labor.
They gotta like something in Kittle to get rid of Vance McDonald, because Vance McDonald has been a good tight end in this league, and he wasn't too terrible while he was there, but the coaching staff really wanted to go a different way by bringing in Kittle.
It's kind of like when you get a new CEO of a company, they just axe everything the previous CEO did because it wasn't their idea. Now, I'm not sure they're as callous there in San Francisco under Lynch and Shanahan, but they do really like George Kittle. They do like their guys. That's why Joseph Williams is definitely going to get a shot at running back. Not necessarily over Jerick McKinnon, another guy that they covet, but he will get opportunities to get some snaps.
Especially if he can learn that offense, because last year the only knock on him before the season started was he wasn't picking up that offense. It will be interesting to see with a year under his belt, not playing, if he can get things sorted out upstairs. So, offensive line from left to right, it's Joe Staley at left tackle, Laken Tomlinson at left guard. At center right now, it's Weston Richburg penciled in, but it could be guys like Mike Person who play there, even Jonathan Cooper. At right guard, it's Josh Garnett so far, who did redshirt, or he might have been hurt last year. And at right tackle, the first round pick in Mike McGlinchey.
Now, this offensive line, I am a little bit curious. I do think they're bookended. I mean, the first round pick, Mike McGlinchey, again, I can't crown his ass, but he does look like he's going to be the real deal. Joe Staley, I like to think of him as the new Joe Thomas, since Joe Thomas has retired. He's been a staple in the league since 2007. Key contributor, solid player, been good year in, year out. Maybe not great, but very good. The interior is where it gets a little bit of intrigue, let's say. Garnett hasn't played very much since he's been drafted 2 years ago, and the rest of the offensive line are all kind of retreads. So I'm not sure who's going to start where necessarily, but there is depth and they do have options, which is probably the best way of going. And if you're going to build an offensive line, free agency, it is possible to do so, unlike other positions. So at least they're bookended, and they will be able to sort out the interior. And this is another thing like the wide receiver group. It's not a strength, but it isn't a weakness.
You bringing that up is quite interesting because Shanahan has had excellent offensive lines in both Cleveland and Atlanta, and he was centered by Alex Mack on both teams. It's surprising he didn't go out and try to find a guy who was a little bit more of a name than these guys, but he must like one of these guys, or there is going to be a good camp battle between Richburg and Person and whoever else decides to pop in at center.
Maybe Richburg's unheralded, because it's difficult to get talents like Alex Mack at center. There just aren't that many. I mean, think about it. Who else is that good at center? Rodney Hudson maybe in Oakland? I don't think so. Travis Frederick in Dallas. Jason Kelce in Philadelphia. There's only a handful of centers you're able to corral into your team. So maybe Weston Richburg is a underrated talent in the eyes of Shanahan and company.
So moving over to the defensive side of the ball, on the D-line they have Eric Armstead, Earl Mitchell, DeForest Buckner, Solomon Thomas, as well as pass rushers like Jeremiah Attachu, Cassius Marsh, a couple other guys that could play on the inside, and Sheldon Day, DJ Jones. as well as a 4th round pick in Kentavious Street, who will play on the outside.
Isn't that a fun name to say? DeForest Buckner. That's DeForest Buckner.
The game wrecker.
Yeah, he might be the best player on this defensive line. I was so high on Solomon Thomas. Now, if you look at his Stanford highlight reels from when he was in college, they're unbelievable. That didn't translate last year. Another interesting thing about Solomon Thomas, he shared classes at Stanford with John Lynch, and they did a group project together, which I always found funny. So he must be a high character guy. He lived in Australia for some time. Both his parents are athletes, and I do think he will be able to take the next leap. And a lot of those guys you name that are starting, Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, Solomon Thomas, those are all first-round picks. So it is highlighted by athleticism and youth, this San Francisco 49ers defensive line. So I am really excited for him. I think this will turn into a great strength. Maybe not this year, but maybe the next.
And at linebacker, they're highlighted by an excellent talent in Reuben Foster. On the field, he's unreal. Off the field is another question. They also have Malcolm Smith, as well as Eli Harold. Other guys like Corey Toomer, Dakota Watson, Brock Coyle, guys that have also played. Fat Guy, what do you think about these linebackers?
I think a lot of it's predicated on whether Reuben Foster is going to be playing a lot. I mean, considering some of the off-field stuff, his status is more or less up in the air, unless something's finalized between now and when we publish this. Reuben Foster is a strong talent out of Alabama, and if you play on defense in Alabama, particularly linebacker, chances are you're pretty good, and Reuben Foster was really good when he played. Eli Harold, Brock Coyle, Corey Toomer, Malcolm Smith. Malcolm Smith, former Super Bowl MVP Malcolm Smith, by way of Seattle, then to the Raiders, and then to the Bay Area rival 49ers that we're talking about. You are going to be able to pull out 3 decent players out of that. There's another thing I'm going to fall back on when discussing the San Francisco 49ers, is their linebacking crew, depending on Foster, is not a strength, but not necessarily a weakness. So there's a lot of optimism in San Francisco because they're not really bad anywhere, and they're very good in certain areas.
One guy I'll bring up because I forgot to mention him the first time. They do have a 3rd round pick in Fred Warner, who has a chance to play, knowing that these guys have made so much turnover for the rest of the roster, and they've had success picking other guys. So Fred Warner has a chance of playing.
Definitely. Any of these selections that they make, they don't seem to shelf them very often. They like to just throw them right in there. And I hope they do that. The preseason will define who's going to play a lot more so than any of the news that'll be coming out of camp in the coming weeks.
And at cornerback, they have a few guys that can play that have had snaps in the NFL and had success. And it starts out with Richard Sherman, who is going to be the anchor of that defense, as well as Ahkello Witherspoon, Jimmy Ward, as well as Kwan Williams.
Kwan Williams, Ahkello Witherspoon, Jimmy Ward, young, talented group. Jimmy Ward, highest base salary on the San Francisco 49ers, I just read. I don't know how that can be true, but he's a bit of a joker in this secondary. Moves around place to place. Will play nickel corner, perhaps some snaps at safety. So I'm really interested in how Jimmy Ward's going to be deployed in this defense. But you said it best. Richard Sherman is definitely the crux. Another word I like to use lately. The crux of this San Francisco 49ers secondary. Witherspoon was a rookie last year. Trial by fire. Worked out. Kwan Williams, he ended up working out for the San Francisco 49ers when they had to revamp their cornerbacking group. They kind of just did the next man up thing. Much like Seattle. I don't know why these two teams are so entwined, both divisionally and alphabetically, but the Seattle Seahawks and San Francisco 49ers kind of remind me of each other in 2 different ways. The 49ers might be the Seahawks of new. This is a really strong team with a strong quarterback, and I like their secondary. It's young with one guy with a lot of experience who was on Seattle and Richard Sherman. This cornerbacking crew is going to be good, I believe.
And one guy I forgot to mention in players that they lost is safety Eric Reed, a guy who I can't believe is still a free agent as of this day, July 22nd.
There's a lot of politics that might go into why Eric Reed isn't on the team, but that's not for us to decide. It's for the league to figure out. I would rather him on my team playing than off the field not playing, but that's the choices they made, and they don't have necessarily a bad situation at safety, do they?
No, they don't, because they do have Jaquiski Tart, as well as Adrian Colbert, who was a 7th round pick last year, who came in and played and had success. And as well, Jimmy Ward, who is the nickel corner, sometimes goes back and does play some safety.
You have some options there between the 3, between Adrian Colbert, Jaquiski Tart. And like I mentioned, Jimmy Ward. There is some flexibility there. They have the versatility they need. They have a lot of speed and youth in the secondary, which is two things that you really want.
What's the strength of this roster?
I actually think it's quarterback. Now, people can really trample on me because the sample size is so small in Jimmy Garoppolo, but I think he's a good player. I really do. He's a strength on this team for me, especially on offense. Now, if I were to give the defense a tip of the hat, I think as it stands, I like their secondary, cornerback in particular. However, though, I'm so hopeful about their defensive line. I think they could become real game wreckers. They could become the Jacksonville Jaguars in a year or two.
That's true, especially with guys like DeForest Buckner and Reuben Foster, those two guys specifically are really, really special players, and that's Solomon Thomas is the same way. If he can play like how he played in college, he is a very dangerous player as well. Those are three guys that it's going to be tough to go up against up the center of that defense.
Absolutely. Now, Solomon Thomas might need to put on a little bit of weight, but he was such a game wrecker in college. I felt he was the best player in the draft. I was proven wrong by last season, but that was only one season, and this next one, he could really take the next step. It's possible.
And as a biggest weakness, I'm going to say linebacker depth. What do you think?
Linebacker depth is definitely one of them. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to have to go with you on that one. That would be, or interior offensive line. That's another thing I'm not so sure about.
Yeah, they really have just thrown it all together. It'll be interesting to see if those guys mish and mash.
It'll be interesting to see how well they gel during the preseason.
So going into 2018, we have the 49ers graded out as a C team. Their over-under is 8.5 wins. We have them winning 8.4 wins, almost exactly what the over-under is. Fat guy, I'm going to ask you anyways, is this a bet?
Unfortunately, this is a no bet. A little anticlimactic because we are following this video after the Seattle video where we said betting the under on Seattle might be the best bet of the year. Now, you're going to say, oh, you hyped up the 49ers so much in this video, how can they be a C? A C means average. And one thing about over-unders and win projections is you never want to get too optimistic. Injuries happen, bad things happen, and things spiral, as you know, watching the league. We think there's a lot of potential there, but like Denny Green says, we know who we thought they were, and we ain't going to crown their asses.
Well, the other thing that's underrated, too, is last year they probably would have been a 5.5 over-under starting the season. So they've jumped by 3 wins going into this season. That's the Jimmy Garoppolo bump that they've received.
They could go to 11. They could go to 11 wins next year. That wouldn't surprise me. This is a team on the rise. It's a team to watch. Even though I'm not betting on them in their over-under for this upcoming season, I'll be looking especially close at the San Francisco 49ers development this year.
Well, the other thing, too, is the Rams are in this division, and the Rams are more polished, I would guess you'd say.
The Rams have already done it. They were the most exciting team last year, and they made the playoffs. I mean, of course, they lost to Atlanta, but they did it. Now, could San Francisco just as easily be that team this year? Absolutely. But you have to give the Rams the tip of the hat, tip of the shades.
Tip in the shades is right. So hit the like button if you agree with Big Ryan, the fat guy. Give us a comment below with how many games you think the Niners will win next season. And subscribe for more NFL betting projections.